Okay, if we could get everybody into their seats, please. The less milling around, the better. Okay, my name is Graham Henderson. I'm the CEO of the London Chamber of Commerce, and I will begin with our land acknowledgement. The London Chamber of Commerce recognizes that the area in which we gather, work, and live is part of the traditional territory of the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lunapawak peoples. We thank the Indigenous peoples' commitment and relationship to the land and waters for knowing that our ongoing survival is connected to the land. I'd like to acknowledge the communities in Circle, the east, south, west, and northern directions. We acknowledge the local First Nations communities in this area, Chippewas of the First Nation, of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and Munsee Delaware Nation. This region is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. This area is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to establish peaceful cooperation between communities. We share responsibility with the land stewards for ensuring that the dish is never empty and for re-establishing relationships based on peace, trust, and friendship. Now, the London Chamber also has a commitment to reconciliation as follows. The Chamber is committed to the process of truth and reconciliation. As we begin our journey towards reconciliation, it is essential to understand what that means and how it looks. Reconciliation is more than admitting mistakes, and listening alone is insufficient. It requires action, and that action can take many forms, individually and professionally. We acknowledge the historical and ongoing injustices faced by Indigenous peoples in Canada, and we feel responsible to expose and correct misinformation while also renewing respectful relationships with Indigenous communities through amplifying and uplifting Indigenous voices, stories, knowledge, and community service. Reconciliation requires having a good relationship to begin with, and then striving to reconcile it. For many Indigenous peoples, there has never been a healthy relationship. While inequalities, injustices, and power imbalances still exist, we must consider this. Through this understanding, we can begin the rebuilding of friendly relations, but most importantly, it requires love, respect, and compassion. Now is the time to question existing beliefs and invest in strong relationships. And perhaps we can just take a short moment to reflect on our own personal journeys and what this means to us. Thank you. Now, to bring greetings and to introduce our candidates, please welcome the Chair of the London Chamber of Commerce's Government Affairs Committee, Jamie Kruspel from TD.
Good morning, everybody. Excellent turnout today. Thank you for being here. My name is Jamie, and not only with TD, I'm with Fanshawe College as well. And I am honored to be able to introduce these distinguished guests that are with us today. But first, I would like to thank our hosts, the London and St. Thomas Association of Realtors. So a big round of applause for them. And our two sponsors, Labatt and Swan Public Affairs, for making today possible. Thanks to them as well. Now, some of you are eager, and we've already been receiving questions, which is fantastic. You'll see on all the tables, there are slips of paper and pens. And what we would love is for you to submit your questions in your best possible handwriting. So if I were to write a question, I would have to write it in block letters so that anybody could read it. Don't worry about grammar and all that, but yes, please submit your questions. One of our many volunteers will come collect for you. Pardon me. I'm about to introduce our candidates. They will have 3 minutes each to introduce themselves and talk about their platform coming up. But let's meet who we have with us today. We have from the Liberal Party, Vanessa Lalonde. We have from the New Democrats, Peggy Sattler. We have Colleen Mccauley from the Green Party. We have Cynthia Workman from the Ontario Party and Paul Pilato from the Progressive Conservatives. A big round of applause for them being out here today. And guiding us through what is sure to be a civil and scintillating conversation, we have our moderators, Graham Henderson and Kirsten Crows. So let's have some fun.
So as I said, I'm Graham, and I'm the CEO of the London Chamber.
And I'm Kirsten Crows, President of Swan Public Affairs.
Together, we are going to moderate the Q&A portion of today's event.
But first, we will give each candidate the opportunity to introduce themselves. Candidates, you will have 3 minutes to give your opening address. Our timer will raise their hand when you have 30 seconds left and signal the moderators when your time is up.
And while we don't have a gong, I have to say, after yesterday's performance by the candidates, where we never saw that thing drop below zero, it's a tough act to follow. So we're hoping you will. So why don't we start at one side with Paul, and we'll just go right down to the end, 3 minutes each.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Pilato, and I'm delighted to be here. My thanks to the Chamber and L-Star for hosting this morning's event. I'll give you a bit about my background, my personal life, and my reasons for running. And I hope you find this of some value going forward in making your decisions. First of all, I've been a resident of London for 21 years now. My wife of 35 years, and I moved here in the year 2000. We are delighted to be longtime Londoners. My wife is currently a consultant with a software development company in Toronto, and we have 2 children who are now young adults, thankfully off the payroll. My daughter is an architect in Vancouver, and my son works in sales management at Canada Life. We're very, very proud of them and very delighted to have had raised them in London and very much enjoyed the city's contribution to their development as young people. My background is actually, I began my career in technology at Union Gas. I then moved up through the ranks, including marketing, sales, finance, mergers and acquisitions, and eventually to operations. From there, and sometimes with some regret, I decided I wanted to pursue a career in entrepreneurship. And so I became involved in the .com era, just as the market began to crash. So well-timed, Paul. Mm-hmm. The problem with that period of time was that actually the good part about that time was that I learned how to make a payroll. I learned the challenges of being in small business, and I learned how to draw on my credit line to keep our team. So I understand a lot of pain that the small businesses have experienced, especially during the pandemic. And then finally, I moved to the university. I was supposed to be there for 1 year, and I sold the businesses and moved there. It was a contract role that ended up lasting 14 years. Through that, I did progressions including World Discoveries, which led to development of businesses overseas. I also did work at research parks, and I did a lot of fix-me-ups at the university, including such organizations as the Biotron, the Faculty of Music, the Surface Science Western, and a couple of others. My final stint there was with the medical school, where I was COO during the pandemic. So I saw firsthand the challenges of the pandemic and the toll it took on our frontline workers and our healthcare system. So my purpose in running is not terribly complicated, but it's twofold. The first reason is that I think I have a unique set of experience in terms of operations, building cultures, and building organizations that will actually serve people well. Clients, in this case, would be maybe students, maybe patients, and certainly taxpayers. The second reason I'm doing this is because I believe Doug Ford is going to win a second term, and I firmly believe that it would be helpful if London had a seat at the table. With all due respect to our opposition today, it'd be awful nice if we had MPPs that were part of the government and were at the decision-making table so that it could affect positive change. I look forward to your questions, and thank you very much for your attention.
Boom, right on time. This is called positive reward. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
You just have to hold it close.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank everyone here and the London Chamber of Commerce for having me and hosting this forum. I am so very proud to be running as the Ontario Party candidate for London West. We at the Ontario Party believe that small businesses and small business owners are the backbone of Ontario and deserve the support of the provincial government in all ways. Because when you make money, the province makes money and budgets get balanced. The Ontario Party will take action to make Ontario fertile for economic growth and career creation by encouraging a return of the spirit of initiative, entrepreneurship, and industry. The Ontario Party is a party with a strong foundation rooted in conservative and Christian values and beliefs. It is a party of integrity made up of a diverse population of hardworking and patriotic Ontarians like you and like me, who love this country but also worry about its future. We want the freedom and prosperity that we enjoy to go on for our children and our children's children. We want them to be able to enjoy the freedoms that makes us the greatest country in the world and allow dreamers to dream and see those dreams through to fruition. Sadly, we have seen our freedoms erode under draconian policies of our current Ford regime and its weak leadership. Businesses crippled by lockdown after lockdown, children suffering with unprecedented levels of mental health issues, as the COVID pandemic became the government's excuse for failure and tool of tyranny. The Ford government is in no way, shape, or form a conservative government, and I would have to say that it tends to lean left and right, depending on which way serves its agenda. To win this battle, to preserve the quality of life that we have, and for our children, to continue to be the welcoming province of peace and prosperity we are now, it will take godly men and women to lead this province back to the foundations it was not only built upon, but thrived on. The Ontario Party stands for what Ontarians value the most: faith, family, freedom, fiscal responsibility, transparency, and truth. The Ontario Party and I have the boldness and moral courage to take back Ontario, speak truths, make the tough decisions, and bring revival and freedom back to this great province of ours. Thank you so very much.
I also echo my thanks to everyone for organizing and inviting me to be here today, and for all of you for joining. My name is Colleen Mccauley. I am the Green Party of Ontario candidate for London West, and I keep getting asked about why I'm here. So in terms of my background, I am a small business owner. I have worked as a professor at Fanshawe College. I have worked behind the scenes of our political system in 2 ministries and legislative office, as well as our electricity and system operator. In terms of what we're looking at these days, we've seen neglect and half measures over decades have strained our services that we rely on every day. We now need a sense of urgency and political will to fix the cracks in Ontario's foundations and to learn from past mistakes. Decisions we make today about how we build places to live and work will have lasting impacts on our economy, prosperity, health, and environment for generations. The Ontario Greens plan to build the Ontario you want. We need to prioritize the well-being of all Ontarians and the people who care for our loved ones. Access to safe and affordable housing and meaningful employment are essential for well-being and mental health. We plan to invest in caring society where people get the health care when and where they need it. Ontario needs affordable housing crisis to address the affordability crisis and crack down on those who are driving up our housing prices. Let's invest in connected communities with diverse housing so everyone has safe and affordable places to call home. To spend more time living and less time commuting, Ontario needs to build homes not highways. Stop the sprawl and create neighborhood-focused communities and protect our natural heritage. Growing a sustainable economy is at the heart of everything that Ontario Greens believe in, and the foundation for success comes in the form of research, development, retrofits to infrastructure, retraining for jobs, including the skilled trades, and green entrepreneurship. By investing wisely, Ontario can become a leader in a new climate economy to secure a future we deserve and for generations to come. The Ontario Greens have new solutions to Ontario's old problems. We want to tackle the housing affordability, improve healthcare, and address the climate emergency with the leadership you need. Half measures and quick fixes won't work. We have to act now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Peggy Sattler, MPP candidate for London West, seeking re-election on behalf of the NDP. I want to thank the Chamber and L-Star for hosting this event today. I want to thank my fellow candidates for putting your name on the ballot. It's not easy. And I want to thank the audience members for joining in today. It has been an enormous privilege and honor for me to have served as MPP in London West since 2013. Prior to my first election, I was a public school board trustee at the Thames Valley District School Board for 13 years. I was also director of policy at private sector research firm Academica Group, which is located in London West. I can say that from the very first day that I was elected, my commitment has been to make a difference for people, to fight on their behalf, and that is exactly what I will continue to do if I am re-elected on June 2nd. As we cautiously look forward to a recovery from what has been two of the most challenging and difficult years we have experienced in this province, it is critical that we do it right. We need to recognize that both individuals and businesses experience the pandemic differently. Some businesses flourished while others lost months of revenue and are still hanging by a thread. Some businesses were able to pivot easily to work from home, while others either had to shut down completely or remained open with heavy investments in PPE. Women-owned businesses or workplaces that are predominantly female workforce experienced a much heavier burden of care for children and aging parents and often faced the greatest risks. Some businesses, like the recreation and leisure businesses that are clustered in Northwest London, had much higher fixed overhead costs than others, and much greater losses as a result. We need to ensure that post-pandemic recovery strategies are not based on one-size-fits-all models, but take into account the different impacts on businesses and recognize the imperative of rebuilding our healthcare system, transitioning to a green economy, providing affordable housing and good quality of life, because these are all things that are going to contribute to our economic recovery. As an MPP, I was proud to advocate on behalf of London West small business owners, and I will never stop working for the people of London West at Queen's Park. I would be honored to have your support on June 2nd. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Lalonde. I'm the Ontario Liberal candidate for London West. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's been nice to meet some of you this morning. So a bit about me. A couple of years ago, I started a small business with my sister that we had an idea, we did the work, and got it up and going. And so for about a year and a half now, we've been selling our products, and we had to meet with vendors, work on marketing, pricing, packaging, and we've had to pivot a few times, especially being in a pandemic. And it's still early in my journey of owning a small business, and I really appreciate all the hard work that goes into to owning and running a business. And it takes a lot of hard work and dedication. It's not an easy path, but it definitely is very fulfilling. My main driver for, getting into politics was that I wanted to make sure I was helping the most vulnerable and making sure that they were receiving the supports they needed, and our education and that our healthcare and education systems were strong and well funded. But I fully realize that if we want to pay for our healthcare and education and support the vulnerable, we need to have a strong economy and healthy business sector. And the Ontario Liberal Party is committed to just that. There are measures related specifically to helping businesses hardest hit by the pandemic. There are also tools to help new businesses with startup costs. There is even a plan to ensure that high school students have opportunities to learn about self-employment, which can play a positive role in helping future entrepreneurs get a head start. So sorry. Honestly, I'm extremely nervous to be here today, and this is the first time that I'm doing this in front of so many people, so I am honestly a bit nervous. We've got ready to implement solutions that will help us for long-term success. That being said, I personally know I still have a lot to learn about the business world, especially medium and large enterprises. But I can guarantee that I cannot guarantee I have all the answers, but I will work my hardest to do my best and find out those answers for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody, for those introductory remarks. We're now going to go into our Q&A segment. The questions will be a blend of those asked by the audience and that were pre-prepared and provided to us by our members. I think the way we'll do this to ensure that everybody, that we're not starting with the same person is, Vanessa, we'll start at the end with you and work this way, and then we'll go to Peggy, and then Carol, and keep sort of circling around that way. So we're going to tag team this, Kirsten and I. What did I do? Oh, yesterday. Okay, so sorry. I've got to write this down. Yes, sorry. Colleen. Oops. People who know me know this is like typical. Yeah.
I get Pauline a lot.
Okay, yeah. All right, well, anyway, I'll turn it over to my partner here who will ask the first question of you. Remember, 2 minutes. We're probably, with 5 folks here today, going to be able to get through 6 questions if we're lucky. So if we can keep to that time frame or less, we'll get even more in. Away we go.
All right, for the first question, it is generally agreed that the province, including London, is facing a housing crisis. What is your view on the issue, and do you have any ideas how your government would tackle this issue? Do you have any ideas specifically for London? And we'll start with you, Vanessa.
Thank you for the question. So we are having a big problem here in London with our housing supply and affordability, and it really hits home, even for myself. Just finding even a rental. I spent 2 years on a wait list just to find or to be able to get into the home I currently am in, and prices are just skyrocketing. And another example that was difficult is my parents. My father's been in the military his entire life and moved around the country, and he's finally retiring and wants to move back home to be around his grandkids, but he can't afford to buy a home. Even after owning his entire life, he can't afford to buy a home because the prices are so high. And so now they are having to live an hour away from all of our family. So it's really disappointing, and we need to really increase supply. So the Ontario Liberal Party is committed to building 1.5 million homes over the next 2 years and doubling the pace that they're built from over the past decade. And we do plan on making at least 138,000 deeply affordable homes to help people get into their, to be able to be first-time home buyers. And this will also help create many jobs throughout the province. And we're also going to allow municipalities to, we need to really support them in increasing our supply and with the zoning. So we need to really think about things in a more holistic view and hoping that we can work in partnership with municipalities.
Excellent. Your turn, Peggy. You're up.
Thank you very much. Recently, housing has been one of the most frequent issues that comes to the constituency office. In London West, there is a group of townhomes off Belmont Drive that were recently sold to condo owners who were going to be occupying these units, but that meant 240 families were given eviction notices from homes that they had lived in, sometimes for a decade or more, and with no possibility of finding anything remotely comparable in that price range in the city. We need to increase the stock of affordable housing in London and across the province. Just a report just came out that said London has experienced the highest increase in rental costs in the last year, 18%. Average rent is now $1,800. We need to make sure that there are homes that people can afford to live in. The Ontario NDP is proposing to create a new public agency that would build 250,000 affordable homes over the next year. That would be 100,000 rent geared to income homes, and 150,000 purpose-built rentals, co-ops, and other kinds of non-market homes. We also want to invest in repairing social housing. We know that that is a big pressure point here in London as well, and a backlog cost burden for the city because of the maintenance and repairs that have not been done. We also want to give homeowners who are looking to enter the housing market a up to 10% loan to help make that initial down payment, because buying housing has gotten so unaffordable.
Thank you very much. Colleen.
I have also been listening to a lot of the stories about how much rent has gone up, how hard it is to get a home for the first-time buyers. The Green parties have been looking at how we can build more homes with more choices. So there is interest to definitely help those who want to be first-time homeowners, but we also need to look at triplexes, fourplexes, diversity homes, including tiny houses. We need to help the people that are homeless find their first step in the home. We also want to look at providing 50% funding to shelter and community housing costs while allowing municipalities to maintain management control, and give the businesses and homes with renewables the ability to earn credits towards energy use for their excess energy production, and focus on conservation subsidies on retrofits that reduce energy use, such as a tax incentive for businesses that install charging infrastructure. So we want to look at diversity, but we also want to give people options on what they can do with their homes once they have those homes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next we have Cynthia.
Housing is certainly a problem all across the province, and I might say across the country. Home prices in Ontario have risen 180% in the last decade, while average incomes have risen just 38% in the last year alone. The average price rose by 25%. With an average home in the province now listing above $1 million, working class Canadians can no longer afford a place of their own to raise their family. In other G7 nations, there's an average of 471 housing units per 1,000 residents. In Toronto, a study was done by Scotiabank that found just 360 housing units per 1,000 residents were available. Simply put, the supply of homes is too low and the demand is too high. And on both fronts, our current politicians are mostly to blame for this crisis. The solution is not government funneled to new homeowners, funding funneled to new homeowners. As recent history shows, when government money is made available, the market responds with proportional increases to home prices. The solution is a new government with bold new policies, an Ontario Party government will introduce sweeping urban planning reform to adjust single-family zoning in Ontario's most housing-deprived cities. In particular, property owners will be given more freedom to construct 2- and 4-bedroom unit residential buildings amidst neighborhoods traditionally reserved for single-family homes, secure the same right to set immigration policy as the province of Quebec, and use those powers to adjust immigration rates and settlement patterns with the ultimate outcome of reducing unsupportable housing demands in many of Ontario's urban centres, establish an Ontario-focused foreign purchasing ban on residential homes, and strike a money laundering task force charged with rooting out corruption and instituting needed regulatory changes related to real estate sales and purchases.
Thank you very much. And Paul.
Yeah, we have a supply problem. The bottom line is we have a supply problem. And it's been pervasive. It's been identified by independent authorities. We're not building anywhere near the number of homes and new opportunities to create the amount of options for homeowners who are seeking to enter the market. We have a challenge in that we need to start working together between the province and the municipality. And there are 4 things that I'm focused on to help stimulate that. First off, again, it would be helpful if London had a representative at the government table to help influence policies that candidly become a bit Toronto-centric in their format, which impact zoning locally and which eventually slows down the process in terms of building. Secondly, we need to have somebody who can work in partnership with City Council and councillors to examine zoning policies and look for ways to provide more enablement to create more supply. Right now, because there's so many constraints, there's 2 problems. One is we're not getting enough homes being built in the market, and candidly, the costs are going up, so those costs are getting passed on to new home owners and people looking to upgrade. The third thing that's really important is we need to look at innovative ways to move through the process much quicker, using much more digitization, maybe having pre-approvals for permits on quality builders so that we can accelerate the development of housing and move forward. And finally, I'm a big believer that we need to revisit our urban growth boundary. What's happening as a consequence of our current policies here locally is people are moving to Kilworth and to Ilderton and to communities outside, using up valuable farmland, burning fossil fuels to come into work, and using our infrastructure without contributing tax. We need to be much more enabling in our community, and we need to do so in partnership with the council, because this is a team effort in order for it to be fixed. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, everyone. So we'll go to the second question, and Peggy, we'll start with you and work towards me and end with Vanessa, okay? So the next question I have for you is about inflation. We have obviously started to experience extreme inflation. And it's all across the province, and it's contributing to the rise of consumer goods, so it's affecting consumers, but it's also affecting businesses. And the question for you is, how will your party ensure that families and businesses in London can continue to afford to be in business or to afford enough to put gas in their car and food on their table?
Yes, thank you for that question. Certainly affordability has emerged, I think, as the issue of this campaign, and it is something that government can play a role in addressing. With regard to the gas prices, one of the proposals that the NDP has been pushing for is regulation of the gas companies at the source as a way of reducing gas prices. The other issue that we are looking at with regard to business in particular, around the cost of food. There's a lot of restaurant businesses that are experiencing huge spikes in the cost of food. We are proposing a provincial food strategy that would help source more food locally, ensure that we have that local supply that would reduce the transportation costs. We are also proposing another 2 rounds of the small business grant. We heard all kinds of problems from small businesses who were excluded from the grant or who are still waiting for the grant. And we also heard from the auditor that the grant was not administered well, and was given to businesses that didn't qualify or weren't even in Ontario. So we would like to support businesses for a much longer period to recover and get the revenues back. And also tourism businesses, another round of funding for tourism businesses, and the $1,000 tax credit for the staycations tax credit would also be a big help to keep tourism businesses afloat.
So in terms of food shortages, one of the things that we were looking at is helping support our local farming and also ensure that there's ability for people to actually grow their own food through the community gardens as well. And we're looking in terms of businesses, we want to make small businesses to be able to succeed. We want to weed out the red tape and the costs that disproportionately affect them, help them to scale up to the green economy and compete online, because we all have seen how the last 2 years that challenge affected small businesses. And develop an affordable commercial insurance program, as well as helping those that need financial support to deal with the issues that they have faced during COVID. One of the things in terms of the food and making the match between small businesses and food, we want to look at having a staycation tax credit, which includes dining at restaurants, and tax incentives for local food and beverage manufacturers who can purchase local grown inputs. So as long as we're not paving over our farmlands, we'll have the local grown foods that we can supply to our small businesses in the area. As well as one of the things that we're looking at is making sure that there's a stabilization fund for our nonprofit sector, especially those by having a Made in Ontario enterprise strategy for the nonprofit and the cooperative sectors. We want to make sure that we see a lot of growth in social enterprises, and they need to have our support just as much as those that are private. So there's a diversity in our economy, as well as the options for consumers. Thank you.
Hi there. So I think one of the main problems is that, I'm a single mom of 3 kids, and I have a pretty good job. And, you often live paycheck to paycheck in this economy. I think that the economy and the result of the inflation and the problems with the high taxes and the problems with the price of fuel, it all contributes to lack of ability to afford food and shelter for families. I think that one of the main problems is that the current government, the current Ford government, throughout the COVID crisis has followed the dictates of the globalist World Economic Forum in imposing brutal, independent business-killing lockdowns, and supported the federal policy of telling everyone to stay home while he turned on the money spigots and was just hoping for the best. And even in the area of outsourcing his party's economic policy direction to union activists, Ford allowed the hard left to lead. He raised the minimum wage to $15 per hour, which was a policy he correctly denounced as a job killer a few years previously. An Ontario Party government will encourage entrepreneurship by reducing the paperwork and cutting all the fees associated with starting a business, provide generous tax benefits and wage subsidies to businesses in the agricultural, food service, and manufacturing sectors to employ native Ontarians in order to reduce the demand for foreign workers, spearhead revitalization in the auto industry, ensure that it is mandatory that businesses continue to accept cash payments, eliminate the PST on gas and diesel while the prices are elevated, and eliminate the provincial carbon tax and the industrial carbon tax to seek to challenge the federal carbon tax, and of course, no more lockdowns.
So I don't believe there's been a politician in the last half century in Ontario that's done more to try and keep the costs down for small business and for the consumer. First of all, taxes have not gone up under Doug Ford. He has also remitted a number of fees back to consumers to put more money in their pockets so they can spend it on their families and their priorities versus having it dictated by the government. He is also committed to reducing the gas tax to make sure people who are in business who need to move product, be it Uber drivers or delivery people or HVAC contractors, have an ability to reduce the cost of their business. He's remitted a ton of money, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 billion in WSIB premiums back to businesses without affecting the contributions and support of the workers who need those services. He has looked to move costs out of the City of Toronto with an expectation of reducing the cost of government and moving that money back to consumers. He is looking at ways all the time to reduce costs through a red tape reduction committee, which actually has produced a number of innovative means of reducing the cost of government. So many so that they're not even in the public domain anymore because it's become routine. And they produce a quarterly report which outlines all of those savings to business and to consumers. And then he's prepared to make investments in roads, and in bridges, in transit, in highways, all necessary to accelerate the movement of business, reduce the cost of congestion, and ideally get the mobility of our community and the province moving forward. So I think on balance, we've had a pretty good agenda in that respect. And of all the major parties running, we're the only party that is committed to keeping taxes at or below their current level.
So for small businesses, they've been really hit hard over the past 2 years, and the big box stores have flourished. They've had so much support because they were the ones that were allowed to stay open. So we really do need to make sure that we're stepping up and helping small businesses and helping them keep going and to start up. And so we will be committing to eliminating the corporate tax for 2 years for small businesses that were deeply hurt by the pandemic. And we want to invest in our small businesses, and we will commit to $300 million in loans to our small businesses to make sure that they can get up on their feet again and get going. And for new startups, we want to eliminate incorporation fees for new business startups so that our businesses can thrive. And for affordability, a lot of people think this will just help families, but we plan to remove the provincial HST on prepared foods under $20. And this doesn't just help individuals, this can also help the food industry, because people will have that little extra money that, yes, they can go and go stop for a coffee and a muffin for breakfast, rather than always having to just go to the grocery store. 'Cause we do need to have people spending in our restaurants and cafes. And there's so much more, but I'm running out of time. So there's the platform. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out.
Excellent. Thank you. Those are all very good answers. I'm going to pivot away for the next question, away from more business questions into healthcare and long-term care. So this one comes from Carol Walters of the Alzheimer's Society. Nearly 1 out of every 3 Ontarians knows someone living with dementia, and over half know someone worried about the risks of developing dementia. I am one of them. Can you please explain what you would do to improve access to care for people living with dementia locally, and what your party would do to better support home and community care across the province? We will start with Colleen.
Thank you for the comment. I understand there's been a lot of challenges in the long-term care sector. I've heard of a lady that was saying the challenges that we're seeing is part of consistency and not getting care directly from the primary care through the system up into the later stages of our healthcare system. And then particularly seeing how the long-term care homes have been impacted. We would like to see how we can get them support and making sure that there's more investments, making sure that the public funding stays in the long care, as well as ensuring that we have standards if there's going to be private long care. We have standards that impact them, allowing nonprofits to enter the sector as well, and everybody has the same standards that they're expected to be regulated under. We want to also look at publicly funding the delivery health care system so that it's comprehensive accessible and equitable for all Ontarians. We want to be able to say, help people age in place with a $1.6 billion investment in specifically in home care. We also want to look at helping to repeal Bill 124 so that nurses have the ability to work in our systems with the fair wages that they need. We want to see that there is other health professionals and allied professionals getting the supports that they have throughout our healthcare system as well. Thank you.
The Ontario Party realizes some of the atrocities that have happened in long-term care homes across the province, and a lot of the issues that have happened have just been from mismanagement and not enforcing regulations into the long-term care homes, which we know that many people suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia have had to resort to. We see the trend of the money staying at the top and not making its way down to the people and to the citizens who need it. And as an Ontario Party government, we would make sure that the fat was cut right off the top so that the money that frontline workers and case managers that can help individuals struggling with Alzheimer's and dementia navigate the system. Right now, we have a system that is so complex to navigate for families and loved ones. I think it's one of the hardest things that you go through when you face that diagnosis. And so the Ontario Party has committed to more funding dollars for in-home care, for the beds in the hospitals, on those chronic care units. But I think most of all, we need to see system navigation to help make sure that people struggling with this have the proper supports in place, know how to navigate the system, and know how to get the services. Because working in healthcare myself, I see every day the struggle that Ontarians and citizens have to figure out where to go for help and who's the right agency. So I think opening up more frontline workers and decreasing top-heavy management, cut the fat, make sure the money gets to the people who really need it.
So this past summer of 2021, my father passed away. He was 93. He was a very vibrant guy and loved him dearly. But he got caught in an acute care bed for the last 7 weeks of his life, largely alone, and without much in the way of supports other than an hour a day from each one of our family members. So I got to see firsthand some of the challenges of our system under the pandemic, but also the breakdowns in places like long-term care and specifically home care. So one of the areas that I was pleased to see is that the Ford government is taking steps to boost up our long-term care capacity and boost up our home care capacity. There's been $5 billion invested in long-term care. They're expanding 31,000 beds to get our increase up, but that's not even going to be enough. And we're going to need to boost our home care side. And on the home care side, the government announced recently a $1 billion investment over the next 3 years. If I get elected, one of the things I'm going to be doing is pushing that even higher, because I think there's a dignity and an appreciation of home care that probably needs to be further recognized across our province. And I would love to use agencies like the Alzheimer's Society, VON, and some of the organizations that have the expertise to be able to get into the field and enable them to provide the supports to families, not just the person who may be a patient, but to the caregivers themselves. So this is an area that still needs a lot of work. It's great to see the progress being made from years of neglect, but it's an area that is particularly holds a great deal of passion for me because of what I experienced in my family. And so that's going to be an area of focus for me, and it's going to be an area that I think I can make a contribution, not just here in London, but across the sector. Thanks.
Over the past while, I've been talking to a lot of nurses, PSWs, and home care workers, a lot of family and neighbors, and they've been struggling themselves over the past couple of years. And we know that our seniors want to stay in home, and so we need to allow them to make that choice to stay home. And so we want to make sure that every senior has the opportunity to stay home with the care that they need. And if someone does need to go into long-term care, we want to transition from the big warehouse-style institutions that we have for our seniors. We want to create home-based homes that look and feel like home so that our seniors are comfortable and they have the supports that they need with nurses and PSWs on site, but there's only like 5 or 6 in a home, but in the communities that they live and love. And that's so important for someone not to have to move away from their communities. And we do plan on repealing Bill 124, which I feel it took away so many supports, and it showed a complete lack of respect to our nurses. And they were the backbone throughout this pandemic, and we need to support them. Along with that, we do plan to grow our beds in hospitals by 20%, but we will make sure that we also have the nurses to man them, because there's no point in having the beds if we don't have anyone to help those that are in the beds. And
I would say that privatized home care has really been a disaster for people in London and across the province. I hear so many people calling my office because they've been discharged from the hospital and are waiting for somebody to come into their home to change the dressing, and that person doesn't show up, or there's a different PSW who comes every time that people need ongoing assistance, and they have to retrain them in their specific needs. So an NDP government is looking to make more than $1 billion investment in home and community care to improve and enhance those services, to support people to remain in place, but also to transition away from privatized for-profit home and community care to a public and not-for-profit model. We also want to make that same transition in the long-term care sector. We know that throughout the pandemic, rates of infection and deaths were 4 or 5 times higher in privately owned long-term care homes versus public or municipal long-term care homes. So we need to take the profit out of care and ensure that the dollars are spent on providing the care and also compensating the people who are giving that care fairly. And that means repealing Bill 124, improving the wages of PSWs. There's like a 60% turnover in PSW jobs because they're just not good jobs. And PSWs have to cobble together multiple part-time jobs. They're not secure or with benefits, full-time work. We need to make those decent jobs, compensate those caregivers fairly so that people can age in place with the support they need, which actually will relieve some of the cost pressures on our acute care system.
Thank you. The audience can't see this. I can see the clock, and I can tell you our candidates are hitting it out of the park. This is impressive. So thank you. It means we're probably going to get more questions in, and I think, by the way, we're going to get another 4. So I'll start with one from someone in our audience, Diane McComb of the London Food Policy Council. This is a question about local food systems, ensuring folks in Middlesex London have healthy food available both in urban and rural areas. And there's a specific question here about funding provincial school food programs for children and youth in Ontario, and further a question about expediting and passing Bill 216, which was a bill to ensure food literacy for students. So it's about food policy, and I'll turn it over. I think it's starting with Cynthia this time.
Well, I'm definitely in favor of the school nutrition programs, and I think that part of the whole better health wellness for our students is to make sure that everyone has access to food, not only in the school system, but also in their home life. The Ontario Party is working hard to improve the lives of all Ontarians. We are increasing our investment in education, and I'm sure that that will include the support of making sure that not only do the kids get proper education, but that there are food and snacks there as well. We want to make sure that part of the food safety, food supply is to make sure that agriculture has our support, making sure that children understand where food comes from, because a lot of our kids don't really understand, where basic food comes from, how to grow a garden. So I think that in introducing those types of education and programs to the schools is a very good thing. And the Ontario Party would support anything that benefits the lives of Ontario's children.
So whoever asked the question, I'm not familiar with the specific bill you referenced, so would love to hear more about it and receive some information if that's possible. What I can tell you is that I did have an opportunity working at Western to work in the agricultural sector and work with agricultural partners across this area. It is without a doubt the most rich and abundant part of Canada, arguably, and maybe in parts of the world. And it's an area that needs to be fostered and supported. I'm anxious to do that, but I'm going to need an education from the community on what would be the best and appropriate way to manifest that self. And that's part of the reason I think it's really important to have MPPs from locally who can have influence at the government table and can speak very candidly about what's necessary in the area. In terms of food literacy and in terms of education, I mean, obviously, who's not going to be supportive of that? But again, I'm going to need advice on what are the best mechanisms to introduce that, and what steps we can take as a community to make sure that our young people are educated in this area.
So this is not my area at all of expertise. I do fully support educating our children on or having food literacy out there, because so many children either don't have the opportunity to learn about, say, proper nutrition, or just even what some foods are. I've had my kids come home and with what food they were sent to school, and kids asking what something was, and it was broccoli. And so it is very important that we are teaching our young people about our food system and how it also grows. When I lived up in the Ottawa area, my kids did go to a school that had the opportunity to have a greenhouse, and it was attached to a high school, so they ran it. But they were able to, all the kids were able to experience having to see things, how they grow from start to finish. And I just thought it was this great opportunity for children to see start to finish and benefit from pretty much the fruits of their labor. And so fully in support of that. And once again, like Paul mentioned, I would for sure need expertise and advice on how to proceed in the best way for that.
Kids can't learn if they are hungry, and so school-based food programs are critical to make sure that kids get the nutrition that they need to be able to function in a classroom. And it doesn't just affect schools in low-income neighborhoods. It can affect kids attending schools throughout the city, which is why we need a provincial food strategy that would ensure equity in school-based nutrition programs across the province. Food literacy as part of the curriculum is also critically important, so that kids do understand where their food comes from and the importance of preserving farmland. We are seeing in Ontario right now the loss of 175 acres per day of farmland, and a lot of that has been accelerated by the Ford government's misuse of ministerial zoning orders to pave over farmland and environmentally sensitive areas. So we need to stop the misuse of MZOs, that are not in the public interest, and ensure that we are preserving the farmland that surrounds London in particular. We have a local agri-food sector that is, a key player in our local and regional economy, and we need to leverage that sector, the good jobs that it provides, and enhance the ability to make sure that we can source local agricultural products and process them in this community.
Thank you again for that question. Just a little bit more about me. I actually grew up in the rural area outside of London, and I saw many farmers and how they worked and how it works today. One of the things that we would like to see on Ontario Greens is to invest in the research and innovation that improves the sustainability of how we grow and produce and distribute our food. We want to make family farming more profitable. We also are interested in how people grow in the city. Can we have those community gardens? Can we have the ability to grow our own garden and our own food so that we can support ourselves and make it more affordable? We also want to see that we have the ability to, like I said, support locally grown by encouraging tax incentives for local food and beverage manufacturers. We also are in support of a nutritious school lunch program so that kids can get the foods they need if they aren't able to grow it at home. But making those community connections, those neighborhood communities, is going to be one of the first steps. We need to be able to have the municipalities working with them as well so that they can ensure that the zoning allows for those community gardens. We're just seeing one I know about just here in London that unfortunately was impacted by the pandemic and not able to start. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to grow in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question is going to come from Andrew Lupton with CBC News. What is your party's plan to improve transportation connections between London and Toronto and Windsor? I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about rail connections in the Windsor-Toronto corridor. So we will start with you, Paul.
Thanks for the question. When I ran for mayor in 2018, it was one of the areas I really emphasized because I believe connectivity is critical to the movement of capital and talent between London and major centers across North America. So I was certainly looking at rail connectivity, improvement of the highway, and really actually relief on the highway, and then of course air, and air not just into Toronto, but air into major centers like New York, Chicago, and maybe Atlanta. The rail situation is kind of interesting because we're delighted to have got now GO connectivity in London. That's the good news. The bad news is right now it's 4 hours. And the reason it takes so long is because the tracks that they're using are substandard and unacceptable for what would be a much more rapid commute. So they are working on improving that, and the Ford government has committed about $180 million to improving the tracks through that corridor to give Londoners and people along that corridor options to get to Toronto much quicker, as well as to what I consider a growing partnership with Kitchener-Waterloo. So we have the VIA, we have with the GO train, and of course, if you haven't noticed, the Ford government is building highways. It gets a lot of knocks for that, but to be candid with you, it is very, very welcome with commuters who are getting struck in gridlock, particularly as they enter the Toronto corridor. So we're trying to blow open these corridors with the expressed intent of building our economy, getting improved connectivity, improving the movement of capital, and improving the movement of talent. And it's going to become even more critical as companies start to look at hybrid models, business models, and models where they may want to reside in London and yet work in Toronto and vice versa. So we're pretty excited about our connectivity plans, and you're seeing evidence that we actually put runs on the board. And if I have an opportunity to continue to influence that, you can bet your boots that I'll be pushing hard to ensure London gets transportation priorities over everybody else in this area. Thank you.
So the GO train is taking 4 hours right now, and if you take VIA, it's through the roof, and we really do need to change that because we do need to put a focus on transit to help with things like gridlock, but also our environment. And so we are putting a priority on transit, and I know we've been jabbed with this for buck a ride province-wide, but we estimate this will take 400,000 cars off the road, reducing our gridlock, and it will also reduce our gas emissions, so that's also a plus. And we will eliminate the Highway 413 build, because there was an independent study that it does not save commuters 30 minutes each way. It's 30 seconds, and that's not going to benefit Londoners or anyone else really in Toronto, or really even those who are stuck in gridlock. So we do need to make sure that we're focusing on transit and getting people from London to Toronto. And transit is, I think it's such a big equity builder. So we do need to make sure we're focusing on that. And we do have in our plans to really boost it up.
Transportation is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. So whatever we can do to implement public transit strategies, the more we can, the closer we can get to that goal of net zero by 2050. The NDP is committed to uploading 50% of the operating costs of public transit systems like London Transit Commission, which would ease the financial burden for transit systems that have been hard hit by the loss of riders and revenues during COVID, and allow strategies like the last mile initiative to get workers to those firms that are locating south of the 401 and other areas of the city that aren't accessible by transit. We also know that there is a very mobile workforce right now, with many people working from home, and we need to ensure that there is that ability to get to KW or to Toronto using public transit options. The GO, I am concerned that this is a pilot project that was set up to fail. I'm surprised that it has received as many riders as it has, but we need to ensure that there is the ability to get back and forth to Toronto to attend a work meeting or whatever in a reasonable amount of time. And we have seen under both the Liberal and Conservative government committing to all-way, two-way GO from KW, for example, to Toronto over 10 years ago, and that has yet to happen. We also need to make sure that public transit is electrified, which is another important priority in fighting climate change.
Thank you again for that question. Have been being a commuter going between London and Toronto and seeing how the changes in the transit system has changed publicly, I know that we are not moving in the right direction. And we are looking at rail is an option. We do need it faster. I certainly have talked to a lot of London commuters that want to see the faster rail. And we also want to see more electrification and other options, especially working from home as an option. A lot of people have moved here from Toronto because they want that option and being in the smaller community. We also want to make sure that we can establish a clean and affordable and accessible intercity electric bus system to connect all communities across the province, ensuring those connections, including the small and rural communities and dedicated bus lines. So we're looking at more of a regional approach, and as well as encouraging the communities for stepping up and helping to electrify their systems. We want to make sure also that people have the opportunity to electrify their own personal vehicles, so they're not contributing to those climate greenhouse gases. We want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to get where they need to be and do the work they need to do, but also to ensure that we are protecting our natural heritage. It has been proven over and over, growing a larger and larger highway system is not going to reduce the congestion. The bigger they grow, the bigger they get. Toronto is a perfect example of that, how it's come to a 30-lane highway in some places, and it's still congested. So let's give people options on how to get where they need to get to do and to do the work they need to do with electrification, as well as different options that they can take, including public transit. Thank you.
So we know that transportation is an issue across the board. It can be obstacles for getting the proper amount of workers you need into specific areas. It can also be a barrier to employment for a lot of people. The Ontario Party certainly supports shoring up resources to repair damaged roads and infrastructure across Ontario. However, we feel that, Ontarians want urgent issues dealt with, and we feel that some of the most urgent issues are more servicing our northern communities of Ontario, reducing environmental red tape for construction projects in Northern Ontario, expanding the railroad lines to Northern Ontario, add arteries from the Trans-Canada Highway to townships in Northern Ontario, and develop townships with public amenities. Those are the eminent and the urgent needs, I think, of Ontario. However, that being said, I certainly would go to the wall to represent London West in its concerns and needs for transportation to the bigger urban areas. It's important that we find a balance between where the money goes across Ontario. However, London West would always be the concern of mine, and I would vote for whatever infrastructure and rail systems, highway transportation systems that were best for the residents of London West. And so I think we have to find that balance across the province and realize that resources only go so far, and look at what the urgent places that need help first and foremost. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We're doing beautifully here. Everything's on time. So we've got lots of time for other questions. So my question, I'm going to ask you to, let's drill down here to a very specific London issue that's always on the lips of Londoners. People are always talking about it. And so I'm sort of going to ask you to be as specific as you can about this one. And it all has to do with our downtown. So folks are talking about this. It's an issue that has been on the minds of city councilors and local MPs and MPPs for a long time, and of course the citizens, and that is downtown revitalization. So last November, the city received what I consider to be a real gift. It received a designation by UNESCO, a UN agency, as a city of culture, specifically a city of music. So my question to you, and it'll begin with you, Vanessa, is how do you see that designation, or how do you see music in general, film, television, the arts, our museums, how do you see them, and what would you do to help us revitalize our downtown?
Okay, so as someone who is not very musical, but I absolutely love music and the arts. I have musicians in my family and neighbors who work in the music industry, and I think the designation as a music city is absolutely exciting for London, and I think it will really it will just help boost that industry here in London. And even though I love music and everything, maybe maybe at my age I should have gone a little sooner, but it was super exciting because I actually went downtown to see my first concert only a few weeks ago, and it was this amazing experience. And I truly hope that here in London that we can really boost that up. And I think it's this absolutely wonderful gift that London has been given, being the first city in Canada to have that designation. And yeah, I just think music is a complete gift, and hope that this designation really does boost up the industry here in London.
This is an incredibly exciting opportunity for London to leverage some of the brand recognition we already have as a music festival. Sunfest, for example, has been recognized globally as a London event and festival that brings the world music, world culture to our committee or to our community, and has been proven to be a huge economic generator for our tourism sector. So I think that there's lots of opportunities for small businesses and others to really embrace London's identity now as a music city and use that to promote tourism and other opportunities. An NDP government is committed to reversing the cuts to the Ontario Arts Council, which would really help with businesses or nonprofits that are engaged in arts and culture, and also increasing the funding for festivals, which has been so important to our identity as Londoners. The Music City designation is also exciting because so many young people want to work in arts and culture. An NDP government wants to see an increase in the minimum wage. We want to bring dental care and pharmacare and mental health care under OHIP, which would also provide stability for many of these young workers who want to get into arts and culture jobs and stay in arts and culture jobs. Many cultural workers were not supported during the pandemic and have left those cultural industries because they have not been recognized as the important economic generators that they are.
Thank you for the question, and also I want to say congratulations, London. This is a very big achievement, and I'm glad to hear that we're a part of a music city. My friends are constantly taking me to all the community festivals like Peggy mentioned, the Sunfest, and it's great to be able to have that exposure to music. In terms of what the Ontario Greens are doing, we also affirm the arm's length operations and want to increase investment in the Ontario Arts Council and the Ontario Trillium Foundation. It's really important that our nonprofit sectors get the support they need so that we can develop further in terms of the arts and especially in terms of music. We also want to make sure, again, I mentioned the Made in Ontario strategy for social enterprises, so that the nonprofit and cooperative sectors also have the support they need. When we stabilize our nonprofit communities, when we embrace the arts and the culture, we enhance our livelihoods and our well-being. Music, as far as I see, it is something that helps me live a healthier life every day, and we need to encourage that and make sure that people have the opportunities in those fields to express themselves and come forward. Thank you.
So, what an honor for London to be named UNESCO City of Music, and kudos to all the people who put the hard work into achieving this prestigious designation. I can't even imagine how much paperwork must have been involved. So kudos to you. I'm really excited about the fact that London has this designation. Having a son who just graduated from the University of Toronto and who is very deeply into the arts. He is in Toronto working at the Royal Conservatory of Music. Young people need this. They need to know that there are jobs out there and they can be good paying jobs. And you know, when I look at my son, he doesn't even necessarily do it for the money. He does it for the love of the arts. And so I think that's an important thing that we need to look at. You know, now the Ontario Party is all about job creation and economics. And so this is a win-win situation in my eyes, because you're going to get the jobs, you're going to lure the tourism here, and you're going to keep homegrown talent in London, Ontario. And we know that there are plenty of homegrown talent in this community. And so I'm so proud to be representing London West at a time when this new endeavor is happening. I would say that I think the province should support in any capacity it can to assist London with this prestigious achievement. I myself would be very open and passionate about doing whatever I could to support this city and this exciting new endeavor. And so I think it's a great project underway, and I think it's going to mean more jobs, more tourism, and a benefit for everybody.
Thanks for the question, Graham, and I know this is a passion of yours, so it's really good. You asked for specifics, so let me do it, and I'll try to do it as quickly as I can. First of all, we have to renew our Housing First strategy to help with our homeless people. We have a number of people right now that are living under the means, and we need to help our most vulnerable find a place into housing so that they can be taken care of. This includes supports for mental health and addictive disorders, which right now we have safe injection sites. We need to get much better in the way of treatment centers, and I think the province can play a role. The second thing I think the province can do is support our policing. We need to get more feet on the street in the downtown core so that people feel safe. I can remember going down to New York back in the 70s and again in the 90s, and the transformation that occurred by virtue of having safe streets affords people, customers, employees, patrons, and retailers and their employees to come downtown and feel comfortable doing so. Once that platform is in place, this is where I would think we would go with this wonderful designation. First off, we need to build a staging capability and a capacity. I found more and more that we need to create a venue, a network of stages, an opportunity for musicians to play in different venues and with different genres. I would advocate that the province plays a role in facilitating that, in the digitization of that, so that newcomers, tourists, as well as local people can find venues in which to see and view music. I would like to see an engagement of maybe a celebrity resident, somebody who can bring some profile and some prestige to continue to support these types of events. I would like to see the engagement of a festival of some sort. Could be jazz, it could be a specific type of genre. But again, building momentum around music and an entertainment district that is welcoming, inviting, and supportive. And then finally, I think one of the things that we probably need to do well is also have the province sponsor the initiative. I saw that the other UNESCO cities in Toronto and Montreal are supported by their province, and nothing would please me more than to see Ontario be a partner with this initiative. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. We have time for one more question. So this last one is going to be about jobs. 62% of business sector in Ontario are currently facing labor shortages and job vacancies. How will your party ensure that businesses are able to access the talent they need to fill these jobs? So I think we're going to start with Peggy.
Thank you very much. An NDP government is committed to doubling the investment in work-integrated learning. I know that many businesses rely on their relationships with our terrific post-secondary institutions here in London as a talent pipeline to bring students into the workplace and then hire them after their placement. And any support that the government can provide for businesses to engage those young people in work-integrated learning will assist with some of the labor pressures that we're seeing right now. Housing is really an important labor issue. We want to be able to attract workers to our city. We need to make sure that the housing is affordable and there for people who are looking at relocating to London. There is a lot we can also do working with regional employers. We need to look at, as we talked about earlier, leveraging our regional strengths in agri-food, in auto parts, in digital media, music, and using those assets to attract talent to our city. The other commitment that the NDP has made, I mentioned earlier, dental care and pharmacare as part of OHIP. That will be a big benefit to employers in terms of attracting workers to Ontario and to London.
And thank you. One of the things that Ontario Greens would like to see is the ability to improve in training opportunities by providing incentives for businesses that participate in training and certification programs in job growth areas. We need to make a connection between education, training, and the local needs of our economy. We want to look at modernizing the apprenticeship application process to provide candidates with electronic single entry access so that apprenticeships can be done in one small step. Sorry. We also want to look at enhancing affordability and access to post-secondary by converting loans to grants for low and middle income post-secondary students. We have two very large post-secondary education systems here. We have Fanja and we have Western, and both are able to contribute. If they are able to contribute, there's lots of students coming here every year that can take part in helping to build what we need here. We also want to look at making sure that their health care system is taken care of so that people get the health care when they need it so they can be more contributing to our society as well. And, yeah, I think I've already mentioned that small businesses need our support by giving the programs so that they can help make it easier for them to succeed.
So we know that Ontario is experiencing unprecedented labor shortages, and London, we know, is not immune to that. When examining London's labor shortages, it seems there is not just one reason, but many that overlap into other areas. Some reasons for labor shortages, such as lack of candidates, market disruptions due to COVID pandemic, labor mismatches, too many educated people, not enough skilled people, aging population, low white-collar job growth, CERB payments, poor work ethic, lack of incentives to work, and of course the mandatory COVID-19 vaccinations. We also see transit as a problem for making commuting easier, and perhaps the biggest is the lack of affordable housing options for all different income levels. The distribution of job seekers in different education categories seems imbalanced. The provincial government needs to adopt policies that provide incentives for people to work instead of giving people just enough to survive, which over time erodes hope and self-esteem. Opening up train routes to make it easier to bring people from outside the city. The Ontario Party has a plan to make post-secondary skilled trades training free and encourage young people to go into in-demand careers fields by lowering tuition fees for post-secondary programs, leading to careers with the most market labor demands, and by making OSAT more available to those career programs than to other areas with low demand. The Ontario Party also has housing solutions to make different levels of housing a reality, creating partnerships with businesses to offer incentives to hire and train employees, and creating an easy-to-use job board for all of London. Lastly, the Ontario Party will make it illegal to ask employees to vaccinate, which will definitely return a high % of workers back to the workforce.
So, Minister McNaughton, who lives right next door in the riding of Lambton Middlesex, has done an exceptional job in the Ministry of Labour looking for opportunities to expand the workforce. We're somewhere in the neighborhood of a gap of 380,000 vacancies across the province. And so there have been a number of steps that have already been taken. Obviously, reducing interprovincial trade barriers to the movement of employees and skills, expanding of skilled trade, and of course the other one that's been good is second career opportunities. All of these things have done a lot to manifest an improvement in the trade, particularly in the trade area, but also has received the endorsement of three labor unions that have supported these policies: LUNA, the Boilermakers, and the electrical workers. So that's a big departure from what has traditionally been their area of support. And the reason for that is because they recognize that we are in the business of helping workers get to jobs, and we will continue to do so. The biggest area of opportunity for the government going forward is to work with the federal government on immigration and looking for opportunities to bring skilled people from other countries into this region to help with the trades and the advancement of our economy. So right now, the point system, it works a bit against us, and in fact disqualifies very qualified people who could be making a contribution to our economy, and do so in an environment that frankly is inclusive and respectful of diverse populations. So I think that's going to be the area of focus going forward, and it certainly would be a focus of mine to ensure that London is well represented in the job and labor market.
Labor shortage is top of mind, I'm sure, for a lot of people in this room. And so we do need to make it easier for people to retrain and get into different industries. As someone who lives in a family where, well, my husband, he had to retrain. We were lucky that we were able to move to London and have the supports from the government to be able to do that. And so we need to make sure that we're coming up with new investments and innovative, high-quality ways for people to stay in their communities and learn online, and also get more people into apprenticeships in the trades. And so we do plan on giving $2,000 to those who do go into apprenticeships, and make it easier for them to enter those. And we also want to bring things back like shop class, so that our students have the opportunity to experience different trades. There's been a lack of people going into the trades, and so it's very important that we foster that education in our children.
Well, thank you all. It's now my pleasure to bring Doug Wilson Hodge, who's the Manager of Government Relations and Strategy at GDLS Canada, up. He's going to thank you. I will use the moderator's prerogative of having the microphone just to personally thank you for observing our time limits and for your cordiality, and thank you so much. Made it a lot easier. Doug?
Thanks, Graham. And thank you, candidates, for participating today, and thank you for all of you to coming. Thank you to L-Star for providing the great venue that we've enjoyed this morning, and thank you to the sponsors, Labatt and Swan Public Affairs, without which we wouldn't have been able to have the forum today. So thank you very much. As Graham mentioned, I'm Doug Wilson Hodge. I work for General Dynamics Land Systems Canada, and I head the government relations and strategy team there. I'm also a member of the board of directors at the Chamber, and certainly as a business advocacy organization, I'm thrilled that the Chamber was able to host this event today. It gives me certainly a lot of pleasure to see the Chamber bringing candidates together to discuss ideas, and I think it's important for the Chamber as a business advocacy organization to be able to provide a forum for which we can have ideas shared and understand what our candidates are standing for. It's certainly good for London business and good for Londoners to understand what our candidates represent. This concludes the formal portion of our candidates forum. Thank you again for coming. And if you'd like to stay for a little while afterwards and network, we have a bit of time left over for that, and certainly encourage you to do that. I guess until we see you at the next Chamber event, thank you and good morning.